Okay, I apologize. This is really ridiculous. I have just been totally rambling. Okay, now, I've already discussed a lot of things about this thing. So that now all I really have left to do here is I've already discussed the focusing that you can use. They actually give you the hex wrench in case you want to turn it into a macro, or you can just set it up to as a security camera, for instance, or a custom application of any kind. Obviously, you can actually eliminate a lot of the housing and put it in your own. I think I've seen people do things like get a longer cable and install it as a spy camera in a teddy bear or anything. I mean, really, look how small it is. It is the width of. I mean, there are definitely much smaller ones. For instance, let me see. There's one right. Obviously, one's in your cell phone. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So when it's using this capacitor, here's what's great about it. Okay, this wire goes to your ignition on your car. Okay, and the chip is recording, and it does so on a loop. It is capable of storing up to I think it goes up to maybe even 128 gigabytes. I'm not sure. I run 32 gig units, and that's really plenty. Um, Honestly, I think what you'd also be able to do if you're really wanting more than that, you could use it as a webcam, which has a direct output through the USB cable. Yeah, and you would not have a micro SD card in there, and instead the signal would come out through here, and it would go into a some sort of a device, in the car that would also be starting. But it is totally self-contained. It allows you to program it onto a loop. Now the thing about this capacitor, it gives it just enough runtime to save, to write the file, and so that for if it weren't there and it were just plugged in to your ignition, when you turn off your car and it shuts off the ignition or the power to the 12-volt circuit, then what would happen is that your file would not save because the computer chips in here would not have the time or the energy to basically close out the file. Just like closing out a work order or something, it has to actually, it has to designate the file's parameters and all that stuff, and give it a name and identify it, all that stuff. It has to do all those little procedures. It just takes a very small amount of time, but very short amount of time, but it is long enough that it needs something in order to do it. And just a few seconds is all it needs. And really, they say when you're using this custom configuration, then you should program it to automatically. Okay, well, the way I have it set up right now is to automatically begin recording in a mode. Particularly, this amber color means mode 1. Okay, that light there, and you can even program it so that these lights don't come on. I believe the red one there and the other. It's a pretty common circuit in a lot of these Chinese designs. They probably just share or copy each other. Okay, it does get very hot. Like I said, I keep it upside down on the with the windshield, and that allows the heat sinks to be exposed to the air. So it'll be upside down, and the buttons are on the bottom so that you can access them. It's really not a problem to just simply by feel, reach underneath. You can count with your finger 1, 2, 3, whichever button you want to press. It's very reliable about what you're trying to do. So here's your other modes. Let me just close out the whole idea of, in this mode it'll record as long as your car is on and your 12-volt line is being powered. If it's a switched one, I mean, I think a lot of cars have a switched one. If it doesn't, then you'll have to come up with another solution, or just hit the button yourself, which is kind of annoying, but it is really convenient to just not even have to think about it and put it on a nice loop of a really good length of a loop. So in other words, when it fills up the card or when it reaches so many minutes, I think you can do you can you can select the length, or you can just select max. So I think if you put 5 or 10 minute loops, then it'll fill it up in 10-minute file increments. So every 10 minutes it saves the whole last 10 minutes, and bam, there it is. So if you got into an accident and the power went out on the thing or whatever, something like that, you would still have the file. And with the capacitor, it would also continue to record. Now, and another thing about the capacitor is, I hadn't even thought of this, is that because if you're in an accident, because it is not powered by the battery in this case, that means when it loses power, and literally that's how it works, it's supposed to shut off by losing power. So if you crash, presumably, as long as you're conscious, you'll turn off your car or have the opportunity to unplug this thing. Hopefully, you're not in such bad shape that you can't do that. But even if you are in that kind of bad shape, it seems to me that it will, that there will be enough time to have, let's say, 5 different files of 10 minutes each. I'm just making these numbers up, okay? So figure you got 5, and then it deletes the last one and writes it over. Because if you think about it, if the maximum capacity is, let's just say, 3 hours, okay? I'm just making this up, 3 hours for the memory card, and then you have it set to max, then, if that were the case, then it would mean that every time you got to that 3-hour point, it would reset, and bam, that would be just pointless. It would be ridiculous, and it would mean that it would have to, delete the entire file, etc. So yeah, this functionality is great. I would like to get into what more of the programming modes are. So here, what I'm going to do is just press this. This is that's the shutter, basically. Okay, now I'm getting a solid. Okay, a solid color here, amber. Now I can turn it off, or I can press mode. See, okay, so when it's solid, that means that it's written the file and everything's safe. Now M, that means it's the mode button, and when you press it, it'll change the color. Okay, now we have blue. Now that means it's in mode 2, because like I said, amber indicated photo program mode 1. Now we're in mode 2, and it's very simple. You just press the shutter button again, and it begins recording in your mode 2. Now that could mean almost anything, because it's totally custom programmable. It's very, very impressive. I really like this thing. It is great. Yeah. So, for instance, with the way I always had it set up was I would have the 30 frames per second in a very super ultra high and high resolution, and a wide and all kinds of the bells and whistles. 30 frames per second is actually surprisingly good with this camera. It really comes out very smooth because here's why, I think. Because you're driving and it's very steady on the windshield. I don't think because it has any stabilization. I think just because the nature of... so now I'm going to pause it. Okay, so now the video is paused. Alright, and now I'm going to hit it for mode 3, which is red. There it is, red. Okay, and red is always just a photo taking mode. So what that means is that when you press the button, the shutter, it will take a photograph. So you just press it, and you will get the flash, which means that it's taken the picture, and it's done. And you can do it again, and again, and again, and so on. And then if you hit the mode again, it cycles back to, you guessed it, mode 1. And okay, you can power down with a single button press, and now it's off. There's really no charging going on, but if it had the battery in it, it would then go into a charging state. Wow, look, you can see the abuse this thing has taken over the years. Amazing how this thing has lasted. So yeah, yeah, see, and then it comes back on. It lights up blue initially. Okay, so the last part, I got like 10 seconds left. The last part is, yeah, so you can program it to do 60 frames a second, which is really awesome, and like 720 progressive, and 1080 interlace